Hey there everyone, welcome back to the Free Think Dojo. For today's video, I thought I would talk about something that is very personal to me. Obviously, it's not something that I'm afraid to talk about or is like a secret that I have, but at the same time, it is something that I do revolve my life around more than anything. You might have been able to tell with previous videos and just the channel aesthetic as a whole, but I am an avid martial artist. Martial arts has been a part of my life for about the past 15 years, and my journey and the experiences that I've had are actually quite unorthodox to the regular path someone would take. From training in my backyard with books and YouTube videos to being on stages and platforms around the world sharing this art with many different people in many different cultures, my training has evolved to points that I never thought it would. So, for today's video, I wanted to talk very briefly about my martial arts experience and my journey so far. And whether you're into martial arts or not, I hope this story gives you the motivation to strive after that thing that you feel creative or passionate about and see it through to the very end. One thing I do want to preface before talking about my story and all my experiences is that in no way am I trying to show off or come off, cocky or superior. I just am very passionate about what I do. I've been training and teaching for years. And if you would have asked me 15 years ago when I first started, I probably would have been really cocky and kind of egotistic. But at this point, everything that I say about martial arts comes from the heart. At this point, I don't care about being famous. I don't care about being big in the community or some big street fighter like I used to when I first started as a kid. I just want to be someone that can share an art to help people strive towards peace and longevity, but also just to build myself to the best version that I can. The hard part about telling this story is knowing where to start. From pretty much when I was born, I was thrown into an active lifestyle. Both of my parents were very active in sports competitively throughout their schooling, and, were always people that were known within their community for their sport. I played soccer growing up for about 7 years competitively, where I traveled around and played in different states and tournaments, and played for a pretty established club within the area as well. I also grew up playing all of the main sports baseball, football, basketball, you name it. And I just loved being outside and playing imaginary play and all that stuff with my neighbors or friends that would come over. It was just always part of my life to be active. When people start martial arts most of the time, it's because they're trying to solve a problem or find something that they're missing. Whether it's to know self defense or just feel better physically, mentally, spiritually, it can be for a multitude of reasons. So, obviously, growing up in a lot of sports, physical activity, exercise, activeness in general was never the problem that I wanted to fix. I've mentioned in multiple videos before that I struggle currently with a lot of anxiety. And growing up, I was always scared of literally everything. This fearfulness was something that a lot of people were able to play off of. And as I got into school, middle school, junior high, I actually had a group of friends that I was playing soccer with and was very involved with. And things started to change a little bit later on. At one point, I was bullied. I mean, pretty much straight up. I was bullied by the same group that were labeled as my friends. I was on a soccer team with them. I was playing in their groups and going over to their houses all the time. And one day, they had enough of who I was as a person and they decided to turn on me. I had rumors being spread about me and things that were just untrue. And things that were personal to me were also thrown into the fire for the rest of the world to know. Obviously, I was never beaten up outside the school or anything crazy like that, but they would come up and do the childish things of, ball tapping you or coming up and hitting you and, just kind of playing it off. And at the time, it really affected me. Now, that was pretty much my entirety of junior high experience. And as I got into high school, we all kind of went our separate ways and the rumors died down and all that stuff. And it left me with just a big hole within myself. Obviously, if you've ever been bullied before, it kind of leaves you in a state of kind of hating yourself. It honestly left me with a lot of insecurity. I had to look a certain way. I felt like I had to act a certain way to please others, and it became a huge part of my identity throughout high school. However, when I did get into my freshman year of high school, I actually got to reconnect with some friends that went to different junior highs than me that I grew up with. So I was able to find some genuine people to get back into, and it really helped with, creating new friend groups and learning to trust people again. As I finished up my freshman year of high school, I was joining our school's track team and was meeting some other people there, and things started to look up for me. But as I transitioned from my freshman year to sophomore year, I still felt like something was missing. Even though those guys left and I never really came across them as much anymore, I had this underlying fear of experiencing the bullying again. And then when you mix that with puberty and girls and classes and just life kind of becoming real to you at that point, that fear was starting to become a little too much. At that point, I tried to get back into soccer after the situation, and I wasn't able to do it. I felt like it was still lingering in that sense, and I had lost my passion for sports. At that moment, I felt like I didn't know what path to take. I always had sports growing up, I always had something I was doing, and for the first time in my life, I didn't know where to go. I mentioned I was on the track team and I was kind of enjoying that a little bit, but I also joined the marching band as well to play drums. Obviously, anybody in school or just growing up in general is prone to try out many different things. We have to figure out what we like, what naturally we gravitate to, and eventually what our passions are and what our hobbies are in life. While I still performed those throughout my entirety of high school, I felt like something, again, was still missing. Marching band did not take away the fears and insecurities I had. Marching band didn't really get me more physically fit besides the marching part, and track and field was very political. It was a 7A school, it was big, and I was just another kid in the bunch. I started to feel like I was losing a purpose. I was feeling like I was lost. And when you're that early in age and you're still developing, you don't have all the answers. So most of the time, my thoughts and my mindset started to get dark. I was depressed. I had bad thoughts. I felt like I was going down a path that a lot of people fall into when they feel like they're forgotten or they feel neglected. And I just didn't know what to do. I've also always been very emotionally distant, so I never really took on the opportunities to talk to people about it. I always felt like a burden to people like my parents and my brother and my friends. I never wanted to be the Debbie Downer. I wanted to be the guy that was supportive. I wanted to be the friend that would show up and, would power through anything. And that was really more taxing than anything. I was having trouble expressing myself. Now, martial arts was never an option at the beginning. Obviously, I liked Rocky movies and I would, have a punching bag in my basement that I punch with my dad with these old boxing gloves. But I never really thought more past that. It was just boxing, funny, fighting, cool. It was never really hard thoughts that were put into it that would help me dive deeper. I was also an angry kid. I had a lot of emotions that I boiled up because I was emotionally distant, didn't know how to communicate, and I would boil up and then explode sometimes. So the thought of adding violence, martial arts, and all that stuff into the mix just didn't seem right at the time. But then something changed. My sophomore year of high school, my mom actually started working at the school that I was at. And one day I was sitting outside her room waiting for her to get off work so we could leave. And I was scrolling through social media at the time, whether it was Facebook or I don't even know if Instagram was around really at that time. But there was news coming out of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. Even thinking back on it now, it brings me a lot of different emotions: anger, disgust, sadness. It was just such a terrible event. And if you were around at the time or aware of it at the time, you know how big it was because school shootings were happening, but they weren't really that brutal and that disgusting until that event. At that time, I was struck with a different type of emotion, something that I never really experienced. It was a mix between anger and fear, but it kind of turned into like a determination type feeling. I remember looking in the window at my mom doing her work and kind of just thinking, she's in the school, I'm in the school. I can't imagine something like that happening to my mom. I remember at that moment when I was sitting outside that I was done being afraid. I wanted to try to do something to not only help with the fear of the world, but the fear that's living within me, the fear of my insecurities taking over, the fear of my depression taking over. I wanted to do something. Every day when I would come home from school, I was always on YouTube. Usually I would do it before my homework or when I was supposed to be doing my homework. And I remember that day going home and looking up in the search bar, martial arts. It almost seemed like it was fate that the first video that popped up was of Bruce Lee's Return of the Dragon from 1971. That movie, specifically the fight scene with him and Chuck Norris at the very end, just going at it. The scene in general was just so ferocious. Everything was fast and accurate, and all the noises and mannerisms that both of them made during the fight scene, it just exemplified masculinity. It showed confidence, and it just felt like that is what I wanted. That's what I needed to see. Now, obviously, I've heard of Bruce Lee before that. I knew of Chuck Norris, obviously, with all the jokes that ran around when I was growing up. But at the same time, I never looked at it in a certain way. It was always just a kung fu flick or, something cool that I saw and then went about my day. But for the first time, I was watching this fight scene with a totally different mindset. I was analyzing it. I was wanting to know more. So for the next couple of months after that, I actually never did any training. I just watched movies, YouTube videos, read books, tried to find any source of material about Bruce Lee and his martial art that I could. Little did I know, though, that the journey into the martial arts is not only something that will teach you physical and mental training regimens, but will also throw you into a philosophical wonderland. I went into it looking to find ways to defend myself and be more confident and bigger and stronger and faster. But I ended up also diving into philosophical aspects of life, and it helped me not only understand myself better, but helped me understand how the world is the way it is. It wasn't until a couple of months after that where I actually started physical training. I just ended up going outside and doing some push-ups, going for runs. I was already in track in high school, as I mentioned before, so I was already getting that exercise as well. But then I actually started to learn how to throw a punch, learn how to throw a kick, and that is where it started to take off. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned that my journey is a little unorthodox. I never went to a school. I never had a teacher. The biggest teacher that I had were YouTube creators at the time, and Bruce Lee and his books and his movies and other martial artists out there, other actors that do martial arts. Those were my teachers. The rest of the time, I was in my backyard. I was learning from books or having a video on while I was trying to perform these techniques and get them as accurate and strong and fast as possible. My pretty much routine training regimen for those first couple of years were having a video that I would put on and trying to mimic what was going on. And then I would film myself and then watch the video back to kind of pinpoint where I did things wrong, where my footing was, how I was looking when I was doing the technique. And I just kept doing that back and forth, kind of like a trial and error period. Now, obviously, with a training regimen like that, there was a lot of error. I had a lot of bad habits that I built up over time that I had to get rid of later. And obviously, there was a lot of blood, sweat, and a lot of tears because a lot of frustrations came with that. I had to overcome a lot of obstacles that, honestly, I put in my own way, and it was tough. I remember asking my parents if I could go and just join some type of school. Obviously, I didn't want to do karate. I wanted to do Bruce Lee's martial art, which was Jeet Kune Do. Now, obviously, I didn't have any Jeet Kune Do schools around me, but I just wanted something. When I asked my parents if I could go to a school, it was just treated like another hobby. Obviously, I don't blame my parents because I was one of those kids that had different interests every month and, obviously wanted to try different things and find out my niche. But at the time, I was so serious about it that I kept nagging him. But at the time, we didn't really have money for another thing. Obviously, I was in track, I was in marching band, I was in the middle of high school, and my parents had a lot of things that they were dealing with, trying to keep up, and my brother was in college that they were paying for. So we didn't really have room to just start dumping money into another hobby. So that was the point that I decided that I was just going to try anything to get more info about martial arts, to get more training in. And I kind of went in some weird paths. I would ask friends in school and neighbors that, had any experience in martial arts, or even if they didn't, to just spar with me. Let me try some techniques on you. And obviously, it wasn't the best route to take because some people got hurt. I got in trouble with some people at the school because we were like sparring outside during our lunch hours and we were trying to hide from the cameras so we wouldn't get in trouble. But at the end of the day, I was just curious. But for the entirety of my high school years, that's all it was. I would come home every single day and train in my backyard. I would train with others whenever chance I got, and I just wanted to try out every single technique, every single punch, every single kick, every single ground game technique, really anything that I could to figure out what worked for me. At the end of my high school years, I had a huge revelation. It actually occurred a day after my high school graduation. I was meeting up with some buddies to a boxing event. We were watching the Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao fight back in 2015, if you remember that. And after the fight was over, we all went downstairs in this big giant basement of this guy's house, and they had boxing gloves ready for us. They thought it would be fun to have everybody pick someone that they wanted to fight, and they would go through a 2-round boxing match with each other. But the thing was is that this wasn't sanctioned. We had these torn up boxing gloves, no mouth guards, and at this point it was just a straight up street fight. After everybody had fought their chosen opponents, there were 2 guys left. There were me and then another guy that had actually trained in mixed martial arts. It probably seemed as if these guys were kind of fed up with me. I was a young kid that started off on something he was very passionate about, and at that time, I can admit, I was not very humble. I hate to admit it, but any event that occurred where I was with my friends, whether it be band practice or track meet or just some other hangout session, I was always trying to flaunt and show off my, 2 or 3 years of martial arts ability that I learned in my backyard. So at this point, they were probably tired of it, and they knew that this was their chance to get back at me. Now, obviously, the guy I was fighting against was not a pro. He may have been doing mixed martial arts for about 6 months to a year. So we were kind of in a similar bucket together. However, he was a lot bigger. And at this time, I've never fought somebody before. I've only sparred with a couple of, non-experienced people for a couple of minutes. And I really didn't know what it was like to be in an actual fight. It didn't take me long to realize that this fight was not friendly. I could tell pretty much immediately when the bell rung that this guy wanted to take my head off. But for the entirety of the fight, we were actually pretty even. We kept going back and forth. I was quicker than him, so I was able to kind of move out of the way as quick as possible while he was throwing his haymakers. But there was one moment at the very end of the fight where I got caught. Long story short, I got hit by a pretty wild haymaker from the guy, and it knocked me back and slammed the back of my head into a plastered wall behind me. At the end of the fight, there was a big consensus across the entire room, and even within myself, that I had lost the fight. That night, we all slept over at the house, but I couldn't sleep. I actually ended up leaving in the middle of the night to go home because I was bloody, I was bruised, and I just wanted to kind of give up. Throughout the next couple of months, I was obviously in the middle of summer and also getting ready for my freshman year of college. So I didn't put a lot of time into martial arts, and I didn't know if I was going to continue, but I just still, kept up with the fitness training at least. After summer was over, I decided that I was going to try and get better. At the time, I wanted to give up, but, the warrior within me that I've been trying to bred myself into for the past 4 years, it wouldn't give up. So I continued to train, I continued to find ways to improve, and I took that fight that I lost as a turning point and a huge lesson moving forward. After a couple of months of my freshman year of college, I actually joined up with the boxing club for the local university. And for the first year, I was training with them and actually getting more fight experience. I wasn't afraid to get bloodied up or hurt anymore because I sparred every single week for the entirety of the year with many different weights and many different people, and I figured out kind of the secret to what worked for me. After the year of being a student of the club, I was asked by the current president to take over. So the next 3 years, I actually got really involved in the teaching aspect. At this point, my ego was still a little bruised, and I still thought about that fight often. But after I was able to spar and actually get fighting experience over that past year, I felt comfortable enough to take the next step and try to teach someone how to defend themselves. Lo and behold, teaching somebody martial arts taught me a lot more than fighting did. Being able to share a martial art with somebody and watch it unfold in their lives and change them for the better is something that fighting in a ring never gave me the option to do. For the first time in my martial arts career, I took away the idea of fighting and stopped focusing so much on self defense and focused more on helping people become the best versions of themselves. For the rest of my college boxing career, I spent a little bit of time trying to compete, and I realized it really wasn't for myself. It kind of strayed away from the self-defense focus that I originally started with Jeet Kune Do, and I ended up trying to kind of get out of it. But I still taught a lot of people, and I created a lot of great connections that when I did leave college and graduated, I ended up joining a small little fitness boxing club that I worked for about a year. Once COVID hit, it wiped out a lot of the martial arts and exercise industry. And at the time, I didn't really know what the future was of me actually working in the industry, even though I was still continuing to train. However, martial arts has a specific language that if you've done martial arts, you'll understand. And this language can actually transcend to many different people from many different cultures and walks of life. So when I was able to come to an opportunity that popped up that would allow me to translate that to those people, I couldn't resist. I ended up being asked to join a martial arts group for Jeet Kune Do based out of Portland, Oregon, that was ran by one of the original practitioners of Jeet Kune Do of our generation. It started off me just joining his program, and he was able to tweak a lot of the bad habits that I built from all those years. But at the end of it, he decided that I would be a great candidate to be a part of his Jeet Kune Do movement. Ever since then, I've been traveling out to many places in the country, filming videos for YouTube channels, filming videos for training videos going out, and translating them to other countries. I've also been a part of many teaching events and instructing seminars throughout not only the US, but also been to places like Japan that I mentioned before. And I'm able to go to other places such as Italy, Germany, and be able to share this art with everybody. It is obviously still in development here at 2025, and even though I've done a lot with the group already, I'm super excited to see what will come from these next few years working with them and training with them. But you're probably asking, where am I now? Right now, I'm just training. I still train in my garage at this point, so no longer backyard. But I'm still training Jeet Kune Do, still following a lot of the same regimens, but with better guidance this time. And at this point, I still have a lot of room to grow, even after 15 years. But if I could talk to my younger self that was struggling with the fear of the world, the depression, I would just say, it gets better. I will always have martial arts back, and martial arts will always have mine. It is my lifestyle, my religion at the end of the day. I still struggle with things on the daily, whether it be training related or just life related. But martial arts has always given me the philosophies and the tools to find my way. It has always helped me overcome obstacles, whether it means taking a step back or taking a step forward or just going at a different angle. Even on my hardest days, I know martial arts will be there for me. If you're still here in the video, I appreciate you sticking around and listening to a little bit of an in-look into my story. There's obviously other details that have fit in within that timeline. So if you have any questions, definitely reach out. I would love to talk more to you about it if you are interested in not only the story, but martial arts in general. Sorry if it is a longer video as well. I knew this one would because I could talk about this forever. But once again, if you're still here, thank you for listening. If you yourself practice martial arts, or if you have in the past, if you have a hobby that you're super passionate about, comment your journey down below. I'd love to hear about what it does for you and how it has shaped your life to be the best version of yourself. Once again, though, I appreciate every one of you sticking around in the Free Think Dojo today. Remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share with your friends. Comment down anything below, and I'll talk to you guys next time.